everyone. My name is Sophia, or which is short for Sophia. I am in New Hampshire right now, so I do move around, and we are waiting for the rain, basically. I'm going to start by sharing my screen, but it's lovely to be here. I am mostly going to present today on some illustration work, basically, that I've been working on, but I do want to give a quick background on kind of my past experience. I started in painting at BU and really mostly doing landscapes, moving into portraiture. And after a few years, I ended up going to Newcastle in the UK to get my master's in fine arts, where I moved more into installation, and I did a lot of creative writing, focusing more on mental health, particularly depression and seasonal depression, and combining that with folklore and stories, kind of these weird little interactive ways. And the folklore and stories is something that I think I've really enjoyed all my life and has really continued through most of my work. So really kind of playing with words and text and visuals and how they interact together. When I was at Newcastle, I worked at Baltic Contemporary Gallery and in Gateshead, which is where I met my friend Katie Wright. And she and I did my first collaborative project at the time, which continued on after school, to be a travel-based, folklore-based video installation, split screen. This was my first time working with someone else, which was amazing. It got to incorporate travel, folklore of the Scottish Hebrides and the Blue Men, and then exploring ideas of belonging, which for someone that travels a lot is kind of an interesting concept to keep renewing. I really enjoyed this process, and I love that we made something that I would never have made on my own. After which I moved to the residency in Rota, Spain, southern Spain, where I was working on my own, but since I really enjoyed, the kind of community-based thing, I did kind of decide to do work where I interviewed a lot of community members and kind of incorporated them into what I was doing. I do kind of feel like my screen's freezing, so I'm not sure exactly where slides are going, but I also got to work with a lot of children. I have taught children in the past art, and I did it after this. So this was a fun way to work with local children and have them kind of have their work in the installation as well. It was also my first bilingual project, which is something I'd like to work more on. This is actually the time frame, though, when I first started to incorporate the use of folklore and stories and insects that I use as a repetitive theme and feelings of belonging into illustration. So this kind of the illustrations I was starting with, they were just kind of casual watercolors, studying these little insects over and over in different colors that I really loved, which did bring me to when I moved to New York. In New York, obviously Brooklyn, I had very little disposable income, very little space, and very little ventilation. So some of the installation work I was working on, or the paintings or oils, those were kind of out. So I continued with the watercolors and collages, and started to find out that in the storytelling and the folklore that I love so much and the teaching, I really like doing children's illustrations. So some of the first projects I started to do for other people were, these ABC watercolor books, working with others, which I enjoyed, but I wish I could have spent more time with. I missed that research element, that really slow and full in depth. The next project I did, basically in preparation for some craft fairs I was working on, was an ABC book for insects instead. And this one was when I moved to Massachusetts. Like when I was in Spain or in the UK or Scotland, I wanted to learn more about my environment and community. In this case, I did it through insects. So I did a ton of research, and I went really in depth for a couple months. The whole project actually took very little time. I just worked really intensely, and I really liked that method. I also kind of pushed my collages past where they were before. So I paint my own papers, collage, and then I get to paint on top of them again, which is a process that I really enjoy. These are just a few examples from the insect series I was working on, and I really enjoyed learning about them as well. You can see these don't have necessarily like characters or storyline or plot that some children's books do. It was really more about, nature and learning what was around and playing with the color, which is something I really enjoyed. And actually, think is really vital. Like how this project was done, I think is something I really enjoyed as far as the intensity of it. And then another project that I actually started beforehand and continued after is this project called Mama Bear. I'm gonna kind of go back and forth to, there we go. This actually continues the theme of mental health and depression I was working on, and explores a little girl's kind of perspective and relationship with her mother, who has seasonal depression and is represented through a bear. This is not a traditional story plot, you know, beginning, middle, end. It was much more back and forth. A good symptom, a bad symptom, a good symptom, a bad symptom, very almost poetic in that sense. And it was kind of allowing to try to explain that, you know, it's not about the child and their relationship. It's just something that they witness. It's something I wish existed when I was little. And it's something that I feel like would be really useful for children, or for, you know, children in the future if I ever do have them, because children kind of do take it on themselves and wonder why what's happening a lot. And I wonder why what's happening in my own head half the time. You can't always explain it. And you don't always want to, because you want to protect them, you want to keep them innocent, but it doesn't always serve the best purpose. Now, this project is unfinished. I want to play around with the character more. Because it is back and forth, the writing and text isn't working necessarily. I also kind of want to experiment and see what would it look like in collage. I really like the themes I'm dealing with, and I spent a lot of time on the illustrations, but not necessarily actually how it would be told. So taking a pause from that, I ended up starting the project I'm working on now, which is Letting Go. Now, this is a almost totally wordless book. I realized I really struggled with the words in the last one, so let's just focus on kind of working on a narrative that doesn't involve that. I love pictureless books like you know, Free Fall or Tuesday by Wisner. Those are just wonderful to me. So this book is more about boundaries also and relationships. Bear wants to befriend Snake, sees it and keeps trying, and Snake just says, basically keeps saying no. And a lot of times this kind of narrative of rejection and boundaries are told necessarily from the snake's point of view. I wanted it to be from the bear's point of view. You know, you want to befriend someone, you want to love someone, you want to give them attention, and it doesn't really matter why. You just kind of have to accept no sometimes and let it go. In doing this project, of course, I did want to add some hope. So I also want to show the flip side of, you know, when it does work. You can approach things, you can ask, and when they accept yes, you can move forward. Working on this, I recently realized my current practice is a little out of sync. You know, I'm working a few hours every night or after work, and I'm never really getting into it. I also realized I don't really enjoy anthropomorphizing my figures. I'd like to try to redo these actually without maybe the faces or characters, and see if they still kind of share that expression. So I'm kind of viewing these as, you know, first draft, work in progress. And finally, right now, I do belong to, over here, this Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I do have a portfolio showcase up there. And that's been the closest thing to community I've had for my illustration practice lately, where I do a monthly critique group, and now it's on Zoom. And that's been really wonderful. It's the closest thing to that school setting that I've always loved. But I do really miss the collaborative element in my work, and that's something I want to work with in the future. Maybe someone else does the writing and stories, or work on new projects. So certainly feel free to reach out if you know anyone. And I think that's pretty much my time. So just want to open up to questions or feedback.
Hi, FIA. This is Dorothy in France. So your Hebrides, it's really sweet. I like it very much. And it's hard to make the story work without anthropomorphizing, because obviously a bear and a skunk aren't going to be friends. But the Hebrides, my husband's from the Hebrides in Scotland. Is that online? Is it possible to see it on your website?
Yeah, it is. So okay. Right now, if you go, yep, this one. It's linked on YouTube. The website for this project is down now, but the video is still on YouTube. It's about 17 minutes. Okay. You can also get that through my site. It's called Just Wild Open, but you can also go through at the end, I have 2 websites. Definitely should, you know, plug myself there a little. My illustration work and my fine art work. So you can definitely see kind of the older projects, the new projects, and, you know, ideally in a perfect world, I would have all the time to only do all these things and not pay rent. But, you know, still a compromise in life.
The wild open, it looks beautiful.
Chris here, very interesting to see your creative process move from all contemporary art practice and then move on to illustration and children book. What's your experience? And
It's kind of been hard, honestly. You know, I love illustration, and part of the reason I got into it was because of certain restrictions I had space-wise, and because you know, it's something that I wanted to maybe turn into a different type of career versus fine arts and kind of incorporate that. And it's something I kind of go back and forth on. You know, most of the time, about once a year, I do a fine art project that's on a smaller scale. And a lot of times they kind of end up merging. Actually, one of the things I really want to do in the future is merge them more into more of a multimedia interdisciplinary practice between online and in-person or shows. I think it would be a really fun way to transition, you know, art and children's illustrations into gallery space for different age groups. And I think that's definitely something, you know, you always kind of have to struggle with about where you put your time and where you put your passions. So they definitely change, honestly. It changes on whims.
Hi, Thea. This is Nisha Perone in Niwot, Colorado. And I love all of your stuff. It's wonderful. I love that you work with children and incorporate them into your artist exhibitions. I did the same thing. And I find that it's just very satisfying. I mean, it's encouraging those students and their families and friends to really look at them as artists, not as children. And I really like that. What was the group that you said that you belong to? And then I have one more question.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it is the Society of Children's Books Illustrators and Writers. So the SCBWI. They have actually a big portfolio kind of events happening now and different things, which has been really interesting to watch. Actually, yesterday I just saw some by Klassen and Grace Lynn, and you know, big illustrator names as far as things go. But they have a lot of regional areas all across the country as far as different critique groups go. So like my critique group is based in Western Mass, but I think actually
cool.
the West has a bunch of them too.
Where in Western Mass is it?
I'm based in Northampton. They have one that's
right.
Northampton, and they have one that's Greenfield.
Oh yeah, yeah. I used to work for Mass Art, so that was my area. And I had one. Oh, do you have a publisher?
I do not. That would be a wonderful goal. Or agent or somewhere to help me get it out. That's definitely one of those things I struggle with, is the whole getting my art out and marketing, and it is not one of my strengths. It's something I have to keep working on.
Is there a market, sorry, this is Dorothy again, is there a market online, you know, for like, it seems like you see a lot of kids with iPads, and it seems like that would be a cool, you know, you could do it very inexpensively and it wouldn't have any environmental impact. And they could like page through a book on their own or with help. I don't know. I just wondered if, yeah, I mean, if
no, they definitely do. And I think that's something that's growing from what I've like researched and read about and listened on. It hasn't been necessarily popular, mostly because of course the people that provide those things for children are adults, which historically have liked more tangible things, or a little bit slower to take on some of the technology roles. But I think now that's changing a lot, and how they're looking at books are changing for children because it's trying to be more interactive. It's not just page by page. It's involving a lot more animation or coding or steps, which is really exciting. Also, definitely another learning element.
I would love to just say something to you, Fia, which is what was just brought up about online books. I don't know if you're familiar with augmented reality, AR, but your books really would lend themselves to it. And if you would take AR, and HP, Hewlett Packard has a free software to do it. it would be very easy for you, and you could have the beauty of your Hebrides feel and the intrigue and the mystery coming alive in your children's books using augmented reality, which is basically when kids, let's say you have your book, right? And it's on a screen, and the kids or the adults hover over one of your ladybugs. And all of a sudden the augmented reality software pops up and puts something that you've included about that ladybug, for example.
I think that would be really cool. I've not actually looked into that as my own work, other than in that like kind of fantasy dream where you talk with your friends about like, oh, I wonder. But I actually should kind of look more into the technology and how that is, because I do think that that's where it's going. And I think that also would be really interactive and not undersell children and their abilities and their interests, which is important too.
Right, and also with homeschooling now, I think you might even start with your local schools to see if you can plug this into some of the, you know, the online schooling that the kids are going to have to go through. It's ways maybe of dealing with the problems of not being in school with their friends. I mean, it would be a subject and also an opportunity, I think. Your work is just beautiful, and I'm sure you're going to be very successful in your career.
And Thea, this is Anish again, and Sandy, that's like, I think that that's a wonderful suggestion. You can actually go online and find out who the homeschooling associations are in your area. And I've done that before, and it's wonderful because homeschool parents are always looking how to incorporate other things and how to incorporate more of a community, because they are homeschooled, so they're kind of isolated. And it seems as though you're already established. You just have to be plugged into the niche, you know? You just have to turn on the computer, that's all. And just look up homeschooling in your area. And Western Mass has lots and lots of stuff in homeschooling. So yeah, Sandy, that was a great idea.